I usually don't recommend that they just start in the principal text and start reading. You can, I mean, you can always do what you want, but I like to suggest you use this book to kind of guide you through things, and then when you get to something that you're stuck on and it seems like they're telling you something, then you can maybe go to this book and read the chapter on that content or a section or whatever you need. But that's there as a resource. So it's actually, this is an old copy, but we're using the 5th edition, and it's already in the Blackboard shell, ready to go. And so it's an e-text. If you like hardcover books that you want to touch and feel, go ahead. You can, if you don't want to drop the big money and buy the 5th edition, you're okay buying like the 4th edition book. So, and so if you want to get an old edition book, you're welcome to. Okay, any questions there on that content? So, actually, I've already opened it. You click this link, and it brings you to maybe, oh, here it is. This is kind of the opening dashboard for the learning management system. So it's called Cengage, and it's called MindTap is the name of their resource. And so all of the chapters are located along here, along the side, and then you've got the homework. If you click into it, there's multiple ways that you can get into doing the homework that we're going to do, but this is one way. So you chapter 2, and then within each chapter, there are what they call formative and summative questions. So it's kind of a quiz yourself, a self-quiz with the formative and summative questions. And they're gimme points, so you can hunt and peck your way to the right answer. So I want you to make sure you get all of those points. You can work ahead and do them mindlessly, I don't care, but you're going to want to learn it eventually, because the majority of points, the thing that's really going to make your grade is the homework problems. So the homework problems are, you can have 3 attempts, but I take the average of your 3. So it's not your best score, which I've done in my previous classes. It's the average. So they give you some feedback. If you miss a problem, you can kind of learn a little bit, but then most of them are algorithmic, and they're going to throw a different question back at you. And so that's why I do the average score for those. So I want every incentive. So then whereas this class is a lot about incentives, what do you have incentive to do? When do you want to do put your best foot forward? If I'm taking the average. The first attempt. Drew, very smart, very sharp there. The first attempt. So give it your best shot on the first attempt, and then hopefully you'll do well. Otherwise, you can do it again. But it is going to bring your score to the average. Okay, so that's pretty easy. It's pretty user-friendly. It'll take a little bit. The other thing I might point out is that I've got 2 different kind of starter homework things here. That one's called Refresh Your Math and Graphing Skills. So it's kind of similar to that primer that you guys took. So that'll bring up some problems with math and graphs that we'll need for class. And then how to do your homework assignments. It's just going to walk you through how this system works. Okay, good there?
So for the homework, like let's say you get like a 94 or something on them, and you want to try to get 100%. If you end up getting a worse score, does your average go down?
On your homework, so if you get a 94 on the first one, you can't get 100 because I'm averaging the scores. So even if you get 100 on the second one, you're going to average between 100 and 94.
Okay. Well, like let's say you want to do like a 90. So like let's say you get 100 on.
Oh, you just want to.
You just want to do better. Yeah, you want to do better or something.
Yeah. Yeah. So then that'll always. If you do worse, it's going to bring it down. Okay. Yeah. Yes, it will. Like I said, the questions still say about the same, so it'd probably be unlikely. But yeah, it could go down.
Okay.
But it's not like it's a a totally new question, you know, out of the blue. So it's not that. It does
Just like plug some new numbers.
Yeah, some new numbers or new, yeah, it just shuffles things around a little bit. So, okay. So this is the e-text, and you can bounce around in different spots. It reads just like the book. What's nice is that, you know, it does give you little extra stuff that you guys are used to. And I just wanted to show.
Hello?
Yes?
The screen is frozen.
Oh, sometimes if your video your internet connection is not stable, it'll freeze the video, but it'll keep the audio.
Oh, okay. All right.
It should unfreeze in a little bit, and if you end up wanting to kind of reset something and you need to leave and go, you know, that's fine. So.
That's fine.
Did it unfreeze for you or not?
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay.
Yeah.
So at the end of some of the sections, let's see, this is good. Just want to show you guys one of these problems here. So at the end of this, so in theory, you read it, you come to a question. And so this is the formative assessment. Click that, open, or release. Oh. And start assignment now. So it just gives you a simple little multiple choice. Money-making opportunities result from A through D. Pick your answer. It's going to grade it right away. These questions you can go back and redo until you get 100%. So you can kind of peck your way through. So those formative and summative. The other thing about the formative and summative is I don't accept them late, period. So no late work on the formative and summative. Because I give you the answers, I just expect that at some point during the week you've gone through and did them, and if you don't do them, you're going to lose the points. Honestly, missing a handful of those questions isn't probably going to make or break your grade anyway, so it wouldn't be the end of the world if you missed some of those. The homework problems, there is a 20% penalty for being 3 minutes late or 3 weeks late. 20%. So 20% right away. Yes?
So you would prefer us to use the online e-text in order to do those?
You have to use the online e-text. So this is part of the required material because it's going to keep track of all the homework and problems.
Okay.
So this is what we're using for it. Okay. But in addition to that, you could buy, you know, the physical book just to, if you wanted to get that cheap. Okay, anything else? All right. Yeah. Oh.
Just want to make sure the due dates are on Mondays at 6 p.m.
Yes. So I kind of thought, so we'll get to this at some point, maybe we won't even talk about it tonight, but I'm going to be doing some traveling. And so we might end up having a move class on some of the weeks. Just probably 2 of them, it looks like, perhaps. So I wanted to make it Monday. I figured let's just get it done by Monday. Monday 6 p.m. is what I have for all of the homework. I was going to do Sunday, and then I thought, I don't even want to hear it from you guys. So I'll let you work Monday during the day if you have to. Otherwise, the online students, of course, it's all Sunday night as their due dates. Okay. Anything else?
I have a question.
Yes.
For the books, on the link, when you click on under the syllabus, it says this book is already charged. Like they already charge you a fee, you don't have to purchase it. But when I click on the book link, it's only the 14-day trial.
Oh yeah, that's a little bug in their system. It seems to go away, the 14-day trial thing. So don't worry about that.
Oh, okay.
It just continue on. I don't know what the deal is. I put in a request for them on that, I think, at some point, but yeah. That happens.
Okay.
Sure, yes. And that might happen for you guys too. I'm not sure you'll get that message. Okay. Anything else? So let me go back to the Blackboard. So within each of the weeks, you'll get the content, and then here's the chapters. These are direct links into the ebook. So you can, this is another way to access it instead of going through that other link. So it is embedded in the weekly materials as well. And then, let's see, this is the video introduction from the textbook again. The author had done some kind of short little video clips and stuff. So there's a number of different additional resources that you have. As far as your grade goes, it's all going to be on that MindTap stuff, plus what we do for some of the in-class. So anyway, that is the week at a glance. And yes?
Okay, I don't know if I'm enrolled on the online version or not, but it has like discussions on my where like
So they're like this here, the discussions?
but like if I click on it, there are like discussion boards like that. So
Yeah. We don't have that for this class. Unless you're gonna end up missing a week, I might have some stuff for makeup.
okay,
But otherwise, for the face-to-face class, we don't do that.
I didn't think so, but
Okay.
I don't.
Yeah, that's why it's there. It's just as an optional thing.
Okay, perfect.
I was worried maybe you were enrolled in the online.
That's
by
what I
accident.
was wondering.
Do you have other people been posting and stuff? Well, here, I can tell you this. Let me just,
I was gonna say,
I've got my class list right here. What's your last name?
Duncan.
No, you're here. No, you should be okay. Okay. Oh, I was curious too. Were you guys thinking it was a 7 o'clock class?
Yes.
Yeah.
So I don't know why the registrar didn't change that. So I heard because of Jason and Jacob that the other classes last term did run 7, but that's wrong. We can't do that actually. So it's always going to be 6 to 9:30. That was a mistake and it didn't get caught. And so then I told her to change the system, and then it never got changed internally. It might be one of those things with our clunky system that they couldn't do it. So that's why I sent out that email today. I'm like, I wonder if they're gonna all be there. So anyway, and that I might have been the person who rained on the parade, but all your MBA classes should always be, every single one of them. It's not just special ed economics. They're all 6 to 9:30 with normal schedule time. So, all right. What else here? So, just so you guys know, the online people, if they come to class and like Safaria, am I pronouncing that right? Yeah, Safaria?
Safaria.
Safaria. Okay.
Yes.
Safaria. They get out of their discussion board if they attend class for the online, because they're here like you guys are. So I just kind of have that. That's what her incentive among, and then some people prefer if they could do face to face, so then we'll have people join that way. But they do have to be present for the whole time.
Yes.
Okay. Let's see. Let's turn to the physical syllabus real quick here. So I have a YouTube channel called Rusty on Rocks, and I do have previous classes of this class recorded from other sessions. So that's just a supplementary thing again that might be of use. I got my email, all that jazz there. I also got my cell phone. Course objectives, I'll let you guys, so this is mostly boilerplate stuff. I do have a phone policy, so and this is the thing for Zoom as well. So turn off your vibrate and your ringer and store your phone away out of sight. So out of sight, out of mind. Do not engage your device with anything outside of class. So this applies for my online students as well. Turn off instant messaging, close email software. You will lose points for not separating yourself from your personal device during class. Good old-fashioned internal distractions like daydreaming, as well as disruptions of excessive talk with a neighbor, will not cost you points, but will be subject to a verbal lashing or or different seating assignment at my discretion. So if you guys end up joining by Zoom at some point because you're traveling or whatever, you can look back to see what these rules are. Just like, so the way she's got it perfect, you saw when I spun it around, so it's almost like her head's about the size of Alex's, right? So it's almost like having her right in class. So, okay, questions, Aaron? All right. I think we're about ready to kick this thing off here. So let's go, here's the points. So we got the MindTac assignments is 445 points. So that's about 73% of your grade. And then we have another 160 points where we'll do some in-class things. We'll either have maybe an activity or a short little quiz or something, writing assignment or something along those lines. So that'll kind of be where the other 160 points, so 605 total for the semester or for the term. All right, so here's all of our fun content here. So week 1. We'll start to get into a rhythm pretty fast. I already mentioned some of this, but I printed here as well. So the chapter coverage, it's usually about 3 chapters at most. The chapter 1's kind of an intro chapter, so a lot of them are 2 chapters, but 2 to 3 chapters of material out of the book. There are a few chapters that I skip, so you can kind of take note of that. I think it's 11 and 18 or something. But they won't be listed on the weeks. So I got little topic bullets for each week, so you can kind of see what the concept was for content. And then each of the chapters, the formative, the summative, and the end of the chapter homework. And these are the ones that are averaged. So the average score, that's the one that's going to be making the grade. Okay. So I think that's good. I don't think I'll go through the rest of it. You guys can kind of read that on your own for the week's coverage. Any questions?
That's like a final paper test or.
Nope, it's all going to be built into the, well, it could be the in-class stuff I reserve the right to do either kind of a quiz or test or something, so, but not a big major thing. Like I've kind of changed the format a little bit once I got this new system. This is relatively new with the MindTac, so, yep. Yes?
With the in-class quizzes, for example, like today, are we expected to finish reading the first 2 chapters for today just in case there's quizzes about it?
No, well, it would be from the previous week if we do something like that. What's your name? Wes? Okay. And you said at practice, but you're going to be able to get that changed for the next weeks? Okay.
I'll just have to read it.
Okay, good. We went around and did introductions already, but have you had any economics classes, and what are you a GA for? We just kind of did a short little introduction, where you're from.
I'm from Northeast Ohio. I'm a GA here for baseball, and I've had 2 economics classes, macro and microeconomics.
You have the principles section back undergrad. Okay. And what was your major?
It was
Okay, great. Let's see. You can just finish up the syllabus here. Running, so I think we're about ready to hit the ground running. So. Just, here it is. You can take just one of these and pass it around. Well, it's kind of exciting that a lot of you guys have had some principles class, and we've got, it's probably the most economics background I've had of students in here. So usually, those of you who haven't, don't worry about it, because that's what I usually do. Kind of courses designed around that factor in mind. Sometimes we have English majors. Oh, you guys are business majors? What was yours? Oh, you had the hospitality and golf. Yeah, golf management. So that was kind of a little bit businessy, wasn't it? With that?
A little bit,
Little bit?
yeah. Technically, we graduated with a business, but we didn't
Okay.
have any hospitality.
Okay. All right, I gotta figure this thing out. Safari, I'm going to be putting up another camera because I'm going to use sometimes I'll use the whiteboard and sometimes I'll use the screen. And so it'll be a little easier for you to see. You'll be able to toggle back and forth. I'm joining with a little iPhone here. Or not a phone, what do you call these things? Pods?
iPods.
The one that doesn't have the phone function on it. They even sell these things anymore?
I think so.
Let's see, back Canon. Okay. This thing was so dead as a doornail, so that's why I had to let it charge for a while. But I had to set up. All right, is the screen coming across pretty good with that?
Yes,
Okay.
it is.
All right, so let's figure out what economics is here. So, how many of you saw Castaway? The movie Castaway. Tom Hanks. Remember? Did you see it, Josh? He had the volleyball that was his buddy. He got stranded on an island. So I want to kind of think about, is that an economy? So if we have one person on an island, is it an economy? What are some essential elements that we need? So what are some things that we need? Oh, I forgot to bring my markers. That's what I forgot. Oh, I do have one in here. So name some things. What is economics to you? In fact, that might be kind of fun to do. Have you guys turn that in. What is economics? Let's see. Josh, give me a number between 3 and 11. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Alex.
Like the definition that we.
Whatever's coming to mind. That was a long time ago for you. So let's see. What is economics to you? I'm trying to make it an easier question.
Yeah.
So, and you guys have some stuff in mind of what are some elements of economics. I'm going to come around and ask everybody to give me just like even a one word or a couple word thing or concept. So, but I'll put the heat on Alex here. What's economics to you?
It's trying to satisfy unlimited quantities with limited resources.
No, you were so close. Unlimited. Anybody want to add in? The other econ people? I'm looking at Jason actually. I told you I was going to pick on her a little bit heavier. Unlimited, not quantities.
Like wants or
Wants, yeah.
Okay.
So unlimited wants with limited resources. So we've got, that's the problem we're trying to solve in economics. So now let me just kind of quickly popcorn through the class here. Have something economic in mind, an economic concept, a word or something that comes to mind. I'll point at you, you go. Supply and demand. Come on, I'm coming back to you. Trading in goods and services. That was yours. Come up with another one. Okay, money. Yeah, you can just have one word thing that comes to mind. See, it gets harder as you go down the road. So. And more. Economics is about so many things, so they got to have lots more things. We could brainstorm a list of 100 things. I'm not going to spend the time doing that. But Josh, compensation, good. Safaria.
Supply and demand.
Supply and demand was used, so come up with a new one.
Price.
That was the old one. People, yeah, we need people in there. Consumption, production. Anything else coming to mind, Safaria?
I said price. Did they say that?
Price. Yeah, no, price was good. Yeah, price would be a good one. So I like to think about economics being about everything involving people. Anything involving people, there's an economist studying it. We're usually talking about groups of people, not individuals. So psychologists might, study one person, like why is that person a serial killer or something, right? Well, why do they do the things they do? That might be kind of psychology. So economics is looking at decisions, not necessarily of just one individual, but of individuals in general, or the group and kind of group behavior and that sort of thing. So we got lots of things going on. And so my question is, if Tom washed up on an island, is that an economy? I think we need exchange to be an economy as opposed to maybe a society or something. So if we have Tom on the island, does he have decisions to make? Is there production of goods and services? If Tom's on the island, is there production? Could be, yeah. Like what? What came to mind? Something to help them gather fish. Yeah, something, a fishing net or something else, right? So making fish, harvesting coconuts. So that's all production. Is there consumption? Yeah, Tom has to eat, right? So Tom's going to eat and drink the fish and stuff. So we have production and consumption, but we're missing this exchange concept. Although he does have to make choices, what is fixed? What's the resource that's really fixed for Tom on the island? Time. Yeah, he can't fish and harvest coconuts at the same time, right? So he does have to make a choice on which one to do. So we have a lot going on with our single person island, but not a ton. So I like to mention this when Jen washes up on the island, that Adam Smith, his most famous book that he's known for is The Nature and Causes of a Wealth of Nations. But prior to that, in 1759, 56 or 59, 1756, about 20 years earlier, he wrote the theory of moral sentiments. And so he's actually a philosopher, and he cared about the engagement of people and why do we get some of the things we get in relationships. So he really dealt at a personal level before he went into the nature and causes of a wealth of nations and looked at kind of commercial society and how groups of people behave and how nations become wealthy and how some become poor and what is the driving forces there. So this thing we're going to do here is look at Tom and Jen on the island making their decisions and see if we can see what comes out of our economy. So each one has to make a decision on what they want to do. So let's just say that on a given day, Tom could do 8 coconuts and 8 fish, or on a given day, 4 coconuts and 12 fish. Okay? So he could do one or the other. That's 2 choices. And Jen, she could do 4 coconuts and 8 fish, or 3 coconuts and 11 fish. So what do these numbers tell you by looking at them? What do they tell you about these 2 people and production and
production, whatever he's doing, and Jill is specialized in fishing.
Yeah, not necessarily necessarily specialize in fishing, but look at the production levels. So who's better at production? Tom. Tom's actually more productive in both goods, right? So when Tom does 8 fish, he can do 8 coconuts, and Jen can't do that. So Tom has an absolute advantage in production. So he's kind of better at both. He's kind of the hot shot that's good at, one of those people that are good at everything. And so the question that this raises is, if one person's better at everything, why would he ever want to trade with her? Is there still incentive to trade when you're better at everything? So that's what we're going to kind of investigate here. And we want to do that by looking at what each one costs to do the activity. So if we think about Tom's cost in terms of the trade-offs he faces, if we graph and plot point A and B for Tom could have 8 and 8, so 8 coconuts, 8 fish, or down here at 4 and 12. And so what does it cost Tom to get a coconut? What's the cost, in a sense? Like if Tom says, I've got 8 and 8, I really like more fish. What's it going to cost Tom? 1 coconut, yeah. So he's got this trade-off here of 1 for 1, down 4 over 4. So if we start doing rise over run, the slope of a line. So that trade-off then represents the cost of the good, and it goes backwards too. So 1 coconut costs 1 fish. So Tom's got this 1-to-1 trade-off of how expensive the goods are. Jen, on the other hand, could be at point A or point B, and if we look at her trade-off, if she gives up a coconut, she gets 3 fish. So what is the cost of a fish? Or what's the cost of a coconut? I pretty much got the numbers up there. I want to make sure you're tracking along with me, so help me out here. What does what's that? 1 coconut for 3 fish. So 1 coconut, so the cost of a coconut is 3 fish. Or if we do our math, 1 fish equals 3, 1 coconut equals 3 fish. 1 coconut equals 3 fish. What does 1 fish cost? Divide by 3, divide by 3, and we get 1/3. So we can kind of go back and forth either way. All right, so who's better at fishing? In terms of the cost it takes to go fishing. Who's actually better at fishing? Jen. So Jen is the least cost producer because 1 fish costs Jen 1/3. How much did it cost Tom? 1, right? So she can do it cheaper than him. So Jen has what we call a comparative advantage in production. So our idea here then is let's have Jen do the fishing and have Tom do the coconuts and then meet in the middle, right? So we're going to have specialization, and this was one of the things in Adam Smith's book back in 1776 that he was promoting, is that through specialization, we can create wealth, we can create value. And that's what we're going to see here in a little bit. So if we do full specialization, instead of Tom being out here in the middle, let's just send Tom out and max him out on coconuts and see what he can get. He was the least cost producer of coconuts. And for Jen, let's have Jen do all the fishing. And so Jen comes down here to point C and does all the fishing, full specialization. Now here's where it gets kind of cool. This then represents the world's production possibilities. Now our little world only has 2 people, but over here, if Jen does 20 fish, if Tom did 20 or maxed out on fish also, how much could Tom do? How much was it? If Tom
16.
did all fish, it'd be 16, right? So 16 was the max, 16 over to 16. So Tom can be anywhere along this production possibilities frontier. And so Tom could do 16. So if we were to send both people out fishing, the world's production of fish would be 36. And so now imagine in our hypothetical world, we're sitting here with all fish. Who do I send out to get some coconuts when we need some coconut water, coconut milk? We send out Tom, right? We don't send out Jen because Tom only has to give up one coconut to get it. So you see how this is the orange line? So that is really Tom's production possibilities. Now, once we get up to this point, though, if we still want coconuts, we can do it, but who has to go get them now? Jen. And so the slope of the production possibilities frontier flattens down. And so we kind of get this bowed out look if we had it all in there. And the reason that's important is that if you go back to what I originally presented you, and we have each one doing a little bit of coconuts and a little bit of fish, that's points XA and XB. And so what's significant about, let's take XA versus XC. What's significant there? If we have both Tom and Jen doing their A combinations.
It's inefficient
It's inefficient. And why do you call it that?
because it could be allocatively efficient and moved out to XC.
Yeah, I mean, we're not getting into allocative efficiency, and that's it's actually productive efficiency for that one. But we would be more efficient in, yeah, we'd get, what are we doing when we go to from A to C?
Maximizing our resources.
Yeah, we're getting, because we got the right people doing the right thing, and we're getting more coconuts and more fish. And how much more did it cost us? Nothing, right? So that's the kind of the idea of inefficiency, is whenever you can have more of one good without giving up anything else, you are at an inefficient point. And reflect that with being at C. If I want to have more coconuts, what must I do if I'm currently at C? If I want more coconuts, what do I have to do? I have to substitute. And same thing here. So when we're on the edge of the frontier, we're being productively efficient. So we've reached production efficiency. And so this is the notion of inefficiency. All right, so that's pretty cool. Where do these prices come from? So imagine that we had sent Tom out to do all the coconuts and Jen all the fish. So Tom throws out, hey, how about 2 fish per coconut? Good deal, bad deal? Bad deal on Jen's. So Jen would be the loser on this. Okay, so 2 fish per coconut. Now, if Jen wants to get a coconut by herself, what does she have to give up?
2 fish.
2 fish. 2 fish or 3?
3.
3, if she does it herself.
Okay.
So, to do it herself, she'd have to give up 3. Tom's offering 2. Is that a good deal? Yeah, right? That's a good deal. She'd have to give up 3 if she did it herself, but with trade and trading with Tom, then she's up a fish. So Tom must be the one getting screwed. So Tom says, how about 2 fish per coconut? So what would Tom have to get if he did it himself? So he's got all coconuts here. If he wanted to do a fish on his own, what would it cost him? 1. So is he getting a good deal? Yeah. Oh, wait a second. We got both people winning? I thought it was always win-lose. Like whenever you do an exchange, somebody's got to win and somebody's got to lose. Let's just make sure we're doing this right? That even seems weird. Tom's getting a better deal than he could do himself, correct? Jen's getting a better deal than she could do herself. So we've kind of fabricated fish and coconut out of nowhere? In a sense, we have. That's what's so freaking awesome about this stuff. This is really cool. So in exchange, that's voluntary, that we'll talk about quite a bit. As long as neither person is forced to do it, then trade brings about a win-win situation. Both parties win. That's huge. We got that mentality of a win-loss proposition is on our minds. So when we go to Walmart and I do this, if I go to Walmart with my dollar and I buy, what do you got here? This is purely for illustration purposes. Can I grab your scissors?
Yeah.
Okay. So I go buy these scissors from Walmart. Didn't Walmart win? They're a corporation that's wanting to maximize profits. So I went to Walmart. I gave up one of my hard-earned dollars, gave it to Walmart. They gave me a pair of scissors. Walmart wins, I lose, right? Well, where's my profit? What's that? I gained the scissors. Yeah, what are the scissors worth?
Whatever you need.
Whatever I paid for it, is that all they're worth? I paid $1, so let's just use $1 since I have it here. So what are these scissors worth to me?
You're able to do a task.
At least $1. Who said that? Somebody said it. You just said at least $1? Yeah, at least $1, right? So would I have paid $2 for these scissors? Depends on how much cutting I had to do, right? So if I was willing to pay $2 for the scissors, then I profited from that exchange, right? I profited $1. I was willing to pay $2. I went to the store and like, hey, I got a deal. They were only $1. So I won. And what about old Walmart though? Then they lost? No. What did they pay for these scissors? Probably 5 cents or whatever, right? So Walmart makes 95 cents. I make $1 worth of what we call consumer surplus, by the way. So consumer surplus is the value that I place on a good above what I paid, right? And so values are all over across the board. We don't know. We'll get into that when we get into the demand curve lesson, which will probably be next week. But that's the market system. Everybody wins. But wait a second. I see people in tears on TV. They're not winning. Yes, they are. I just don't know. They might be jealous or something. They haven't kind of thought through all the terms. So we got all of the exchanges in a market system creating that. So now, if Jen says 2 fish, I'll do it for 1.5 fish. Now is Tom losing? I'll do it for 1.5 fish. No, he's still up, right? So we really created a range of prices. So that's going to need to be at least 1 fish to make Tom better off. And the most she's willing to pay is 3. So prices are born. This is the pricing system starting to be at work here. So through negotiations of whatever goes on the island here, they're going to figure out a market price that works for both of them, right? And then a price is born. And anywhere between 1 and 3 creates a win-win situation for both. Now, one's going to win. Once we get that, that's where negotiations get a little funny, because you can kind of start to look at, well, that's not quite as good a deal for Tom as 2 fish. So if our starting point was for some reason this, and then we went to 1.5, it looks like he kind of lost. He really did when we look at from where we started. All right, any questions or comments there? Okay. So check this out. This is kind of the math jumping out that shows the win-win for everybody. So let's assume that they did negotiate a price of 2. Over here, for Tom, he was at point C, was where his production was. And now right away, down 1 over 1, 2. Boom. We're outside. So now Tom's consumption possibilities lie outside what he could do himself. Remember, I started off this story, he was the hot shot that could do everything better than Jen, which was true. He had an absolute advantage in production, but that doesn't matter for trade. So Tom is made better off at all points. Jen is also made better off at all points. So she goes with the slope of the 2. She's outside of her production possibilities, where she used to have to do 1, 2, 3, up 1. Now she's over 1, 2, up 1, right? So boom, she's popping out and getting higher consumption possibilities than what she can do on her own. Okay? So that chapter 1 of your book kind of walks you through value creation. And this is really at the heart of where it starts, that we can make each other better off by specializing in what we're good at and trading for other goods that we're not as good at in terms of the cost for our opportunity cost. So that's all fun to be on the island and do your little economic model with 2 people. So how does this thing scale up? Right? How does this thing scale up? Any of you watch Shark Tank? You Shark Tank watchers, right? So Mr. Wonderful is always worried about, well, if you get hit by a bus, right? What's going to do it? How do we scale this thing up? And so here's what the real economy starts to look like and how it operates within that context. So the economy is about these guys over here. So society is full of young people and old people, people who can work, people who can't work. So these are the households of society. And the households own all of the factors of production, all of the resources. What are the 4 basic resources? Land, which is going to include kind of all natural resources, not just real estate, not just land, but all natural resources. So we got wind, sunshine, soil. I like to call it God-made resources, right? So the land is all natural resources, all God-made resources. Okay. What was the other one? Somebody else?
Labor.
Labor. So we got people that are willing and able to work. It doesn't have to be all the people, but these guys can put in time, just like Tom and Jen on the island, right? So we got land, labor, somebody else now? What's that? College. Yeah, so is that what you said? Knowledge. Knowledge. Knowledge, college, they're kind of similar. So that knowledge is going to be embodied in the basic resources. So it's in your brain, right? There's knowledge embodied in this iPod, right? It's kind of embodied there. So if we think about at a point in time, we have kind of a stock of knowledge, and it's already embodied in people and in other things. So other resource, land, labor, entrepreneurship is the other one I like to throw in there, yes. So entrepreneurs, we've got to have people that are kind of quarterbacking this thing. And then what's the last one? Jacob's dying to get it out. Somebody else? What else do we use in production? So let me get some of the people that are maybe been a long time since econ. So what else do we got in a production? Give me the production of this marker. We've got land of some sort. We've got labor, presumably some people work at the factory that made this. And then what else helped make this? Materials, so some sort of raw materials, which are going to fall into the land category. But you're right. What do we do to put materials together? What do we use?
Machines.
Machines, yes, good, Safaria. So we've got capital is the word we use in economics for that. So capital. Land, labor, capital, and entrepreneurship round out the 4 basic resources that I would argue we can throw anything into. Notice that it doesn't have time. We don't have time as an element. So time is not a resource. It's mostly by definition because we're going to think about the resources we have at a point in time. Like right now, what do we got to work with, right? And now we're going to make our plan of what we're going to do tomorrow. So we're going to kind of use time up as we go through. But when we think about the resource base, it's a stock of resources. Okay, so these guys own all of the resources, land, labor, capital, and entrepreneurship. And now they got to figure out what to do. Should we make coconuts? Should we make fish? Right? You get pizza, chicken wings, and all the rest of it. So they organize themselves as firms. So we can think of firms being a collection of individuals that have some sort of incentive to work together on things, right? And we might not think of your boss that way all the time, that, oh, we're just working together as one big happy family. But you get a paycheck, and again, that's part of the market system at work there too. And so we organize ourselves on average, let's say 8 hours a day over here and take on different roles. What are we doing? We're fishing. We're doing coconuts. We're doing what we have a comparative advantage in. So you guys learn stuff in your undergrad and maybe graduate school. You come with some new skills, and now you're a good piece to the puzzle at some company somewhere, contributing value to them. If they pay you $50,000 a year, do you win and they lose? No. Yeah, not necessarily. There's some uncertainty that we'll get into in some later chapters, but at least on the front end, what do they expect to get out of you? If your paycheck is $50,000, what do they expect to get out of you that year?
$50,000 worth of
Yeah,
labor.
of labor, yeah. At least $50,000 worth of value out of you. Now, if you make the company $70,000 worth of value, did you get screwed? If you only got 50 and you contributed 70. Not in a voluntary market, right, where you chose to work there. If the employer's not careful and you were really productive, you might say, I found another offer. There's another company that wants to pay me 60. Can you match that? We'll get into kind of negotiations that way, right? So the company expects to get at least $50,000 worth of value out of you in terms of what are these companies trying to maximize? What's their goal? What's a company's goal to maximize? Profit, yes. So we have some other, double bottom line, and there's kind of some new stuff out there that I don't always agree with very much, but nonetheless, we have profit. So what is the profit equation? So I usually use pi for profit. So in a very basic way, you guys, you haven't had your accounting sequence yet, right? But I know some of you had accounting, Drew, you were accounting, right? So what is the very basic profit equation? How does a business calculate profits? Without getting very technical at all. It gets way more complicated, but I like to keep it nice and easy on the front end. Jacob?
Revenue minus costs.
Revenue minus costs. So total revenue, total money in the cash register, minus total cost. So they're trying to make this expression as big as possible. How do they do it? Well, they sell some goods, right? And so price times quantity gives you total revenue. The price of the product times the quantity you sell is your total sales revenue, minus your total cost, which we'll break down later as well. So if I sell more goods or if I raise my prices, I might be able to raise revenue. I can also look to minimize costs. If I have a certain amount of sales fixed at 100 units and I can do it more efficiently, I can try to minimize my costs to make this bigger. So these guys are looking to maximize profits. What are these guys looking to maximize over here on the household side? I always like to keep their incentives straight here. So what are people trying to maximize? What's their objective? Happiness, yes. So they're just trying to make themselves as happy as possible. How do they get happy? Well, they consume beer and chicken wings and pizza and coconuts and fish, right? So there's material things. They also get happiness perhaps from holding their grandbaby and rocking it to sleep, right? So there's different ways we can get happiness that way. So lots of different ways we can acquire happiness. But the material part is what we'll be especially focusing on with exchange with the business, because these guys are going to be making the beer and chicken wings, and these guys are going to be buying it. And so which one gets screwed again? Neither, right? So when we go pay $10 for our chicken wings, what were they worth to us? At least $10, right? So these guys are profiting in a sense because they're willing to pay more than they actually have to pay for goods. And then these guys are hoping to maximize or to make profit too. Do they always make a profit? No. In fact, losses are sometimes more important in the economy than profits are. So losses, what do losses do for businesses? What do they force you to do? Reevaluate, change, look for new methods, new people, new stuff. How can I satisfy the consumer better if I want to sell things? Or how can we do our process better? Right? So losses really force us to look closely at what we're doing and to become more efficient, to become more either effective in terms of the value proposition that we bring consumers. So we'll spend a lot of time on this side of the equation talking about pricing and or you can talk about discrimination, price discrimination, which is a very good thing, by the way. I know it has that evil connotation to it. We're all just, oh, especially millennials, you're like, you just bristle right away. Oh, it's discrimination. Right? But no, it's actually a good way for companies to make money. And what's kind of surprising about it is when they discriminate, they make more consumers happy too. It's kind of a weird thing, but we got a few chapters to cover on that down the road. Okay, so that is our picture. Questions or comments on that piece? So let me talk while I'm loading this next thing up. Let me talk about breaks. So your guys' call, but I think this is I've never had a class not choose this, but I only want to make it sound like I'm giving you guys choices. So if we break the class into kind of two chunks, first half and second half, then we can let out at 9:15. Otherwise, the normal way that we have it set up is like 3 10-minute breaks. So we can do one break, and then it's like a 15-minute break. We'll have a good longer break. Or we take little ones, like every 50 minutes. And then we stay till 9:30. And by the way, I don't let class out early, just so you know. Sometimes people are good at things, bad at things. I'm really bad at letting class out early. So you can it's just one of my shortfalls. So you can kind of mentally prepare yourself that we will be running up to the 9:15 if you guys. So how many people say 9:15? Get out of here. Okay, that one again. So that's like 20 in a row for that. So that is what we'll shoot for. So I'll roughly try to be, breaking it into those two parts. So probably around 7:30-ish or so, we'll take a break so you can hold it. And then if you're really busting at the seams, you can, get up and leave anytime you want. But, okay. So here's kind of the rundown then of these buckets that I was talking about, or the stocks of resources. So here's the household having all the resources, and we're going to try to figure out what to do with them. So the choices that we make change the level of the bucket. So an important concept to have is the difference between a stock variable and a flow variable. Stock variable and a flow variable. So if I told you I make $130,000, would you say I'm doing okay living in Ottawa, Kansas? Am I doing fairly well? Am I rich, or at least higher middle income, 130,000 Ottawa, Kansas? Okay, rich, you're saying. Huh? So 130,000, rich. Well, what if it was I made $130,000 over the last 10 years? That's like poverty, if you're wondering where the poverty level is. So 130,000 divided by 12 months. So if I did that over a period of time, now if I also, what if I said I make 130,000 every month? Now where did I climb into? The stratosphere, yeah. I'm kind of wondering why are you still in Ottawa? All right, so I kind of tricked you. When I said 130,000, it was meaningless. Nobody caught it that time. But what did I say? I said, if I make $130,000, would you say I'm rich or poor? What was missing? The time per year. Yeah, you guys implicitly, because we usually talk about income being at an annual, what's your annual income? You didn't even catch that I didn't say that. So the variable income is actually meaningless without having a time frame associated with it. 130,000 per 10 years, 130,000 per month, 130,000 per year. Those are all way different numbers in terms of how rich you are or poor you are, right? So you can go from the uber rich to the super to poverty in a matter of split seconds by changing the the unit of time is. Now on the flip side, if I told you I have $130,000 in my checking account, and after class tonight we're going to go to Kansas City and we're not coming back until it's all spent, does that have meaning to you? Are we going to have a fun time tonight? Yeah, right? So the checking account balance is a stock variable. It has meaning at a point in time. So when I said I have 130,000 in my checking account, it's like right now you've got 130,000 in your checking account, right? It didn't need that time element to it. And so that's how variables that we'll talk about change over time is what you do. So of course, to raise money in your checking account, you can get your paycheck. So you get your monthly income and it goes into your checking account balance and it raises the level of your checking account balance. So for those of you with a little bit of the accounting background, which one's stock variable, which one's flow, balance sheet or income statement? Which one's the stock variables and which one's flow variables?
This is a,
Sure question.
yeah.
Jacob?
Wouldn't the balance sheet be stock because it's a snapshot of probably the last quarter or part of the time?
Yeah, so that is at a pinpoint in time. So your checking account balance would be an asset. So when you do your assets and liabilities, the balance sheet is a snapshot in time. So it's a stock of assets and liabilities, right? And then your income statement is over a period of time. Like, how did we do this quarter? How did we do this month? How did we do this year, right? And so over the course of the year, the way they kind of tie together is how healthy your business is doing and the decisions that were being made. So what should we do with our profit this quarter, right? Well, I know we need to buy some more computers. So our capital bucket's a little bit low. So I don't think I said this when we were going through the resources, but the capital is all what I call man-made resources. So things that help make other things. So man-made machines, buildings, so all the physical stuff. If we are assembling raw materials together into something new or compact, then that is a piece of capital. So one thing you want to be careful of is that in economics class, we're talking about those physical machines and buildings, not money. So in finance class, you'll talk about, and we'll use that a little bit loosely in here too. I need to go raise some capital for my company. I've got a startup company. I need to raise some capital. You're talking about raising some cash. Well, what are you actually going to use the cash for? Well, I gotta rent a space, I gotta buy a machine or whatever. So that's how the two terms got kind of sloppy, is that you are raising money to probably go buy capital to start your business, right? And so then they kind of, I don't know for sure that that's the history of it, but that's what that's my guess. So over the course of the year, you can dedicate some of your profits to investment. So investment is a flow variable. As I buy more computers, my stock of computers that's on my balance sheet, the value of my computers goes up. But we also know that computers wear out and become obsolete, and so there's depreciation in here as well. And so if my current stock of computers wore out and some of them hit the garbage can, there's a hole in my bucket that's coming out this way. And so the offsetting flows of depreciation and investment are going to change the bucket level over the course of the year. So if I look at my January 1st, 2018 balance sheet, I might have had $500,000 worth of machines, and on January 1st of 2019, a year later, I've got 600,000 worth of machines. Some of them left, some of them came in, but it's changing each time. And that's all through the decisions that the company's making as they go through the course of the year. So all of these things, that concept is still flowing, right? We got the birth rate, the death rate might be contributing to the labor. People entering the labor force and leaving, the number of retirees, whether there's a war breaks out or something and we lose a bunch of our working age population to death in a war, right? So that could affect so those are all flow variables if we think about the death rate and the birth rate. That's going to change our labor bucket. And our resource bucket, we might be able to harvest more energy through new technology than we could before, through the sun or something. And so that's going to impact how much natural resources we have to use in a given year. Or we might find new technology that allows us to use our land more efficiently with crop rotation and other things. Okay, questions there? So stock and flow. All right, so every economy must answer these three basic questions. What are we going to make? How are we going to do it? And who's going to get it? Or whom? Those are the three basic equations, or the three basic questions that every society must answer. And so if we're North Korea, who answers those questions?
Dictator.
The dictator, right? So we got Kim Jong-un making a lot of those calls. So it's possible that we can run our country so that the decisions are made by a central planner, right? So that's kind of the communist socialist idea, is that we're going to control the resource flow in the economy. So whenever you look at different dictatorships over time, they've typically had a greater control over some of the resources. So Venezuela is an absolute mess and a total shame right now. And the government ran the oil. They pretty much owned all of the oil. They can own airlines and cars and other major resources, and they might let the people have their little lemonade stand and selling stuff by the corner with a 6-foot storefront. They might not care about that, but all the major big stuff, the government's going to have more and more control on. All right, so the other side of that is a market-based system. And so one of the differences in a market-based system is we are going to have individual property rights. So on a spectrum here, if we think of individual property rights, we're going to let people own and hold and use everything in society. We're going to pretty much allow individuals to own the resources and to own how and what they do. So those questions are going to be answered by decentralized individuals looking out for their own interests down here, whereas this is more of the communist dictator side here. Communism means we all own things in collective, so we have collective ownership, if you want to call it that, under the control of some smart people here. So government decree. This is our hopefully benevolent dictator. And there have been examples of benevolent dictators over time. In fact, Venezuela was one of them. I won't get into the full story, but they had a pretty good dictator back historically. But what we've seen time and time again is none of these big government systems have really panned out. There's not one that's out there that is really like, yep, oh, that's the gold standard for dictatorship. And the reason is because we continually look for more power. And an economist that was a Nobel Prize winner, Hayek, wrote on this that it's impossible for you to have enough knowledge to make the right decisions, even if you're the most kind-hearted person in the world, even if you're the most benevolent person. It's not possible to have enough knowledge to make the right decisions. So he called it the knowledge problem, knowledge in society. And he said it kind of led to a fatal conceit that we've got people trying to run the country that think they know more than they do, probably because of some economist that said, oh, I've got a mathematical model that solves that, or whatever. So that is kind of our two ends of the spectrum on answering these questions. So the United States was kind of a big experiment, frankly, because prior to the United States in 1776 with the Declaration of Independence, the world was pretty much run by kings and queens, right? I mean, we had that type of system for all of history, and the United States was the first to come in and try to make something work through a rule of law rather than a rule of man. So if you've heard the concept rule of law, it's really juxtaposed to rule of man. So the king or queen would say, you do this, you do that, I'll make all the decisions. That's a rule of man. Whereas in theory in the United States, whether Obama's in office or whether Trump's in office or whatever, we don't have rules changing all the time, right? It's a fairly stable system over time, and it takes quite a bit to get things changed so that business people can make long-range plans. When they decide to go open up a new business, and they're going to have to break ground on a $1 million building and piece of land, they're not looking to have the laws change on in the next 3 years or 1 year, right? They're thinking 20, 30 years out. So it's important in a system like that, in a market-based system, to have a good, stable rule of law. And so the government's there to provide those property rights, a policing system, a court system, all the things that we tend to take for granted in the United States that don't exist in other places, right? A non-corrupt government, that you don't have to bribe your way when you get into trouble, or the rich people can bribe their way out of the system. So that's easier said than done, because places that have that system in place already, you can't get those rulers out of there because they're having way too much fun controlling all the resources. They're the rich guys. They have the power, right? And so usually it ends up through revolution, some sort of uprising is how governments get overturned, because we've kind of gotten away from the United States running over and say, oh, you start treating your people like this because it's worked for us, or I'm going to kill you. I'm going to take over your country, or we're going to help them get out. For the most part, we try to avoid that now. Of course, we know some of the conflicts that are out there, so it's not sometimes easier said than done. So in the market system, our final goods and services are going to be determined through production and consumption of people's wants. And so what's amazing here, that kind of gives me goosebumps sometimes thinking about it, is what goes on a given day of transforming things that we really don't care as much about, the resources, into these final goods and services. Day in and day out, there's pizza, there's shirts, there's basketballs. I mean, it's just amazing to think of what goes on with nobody controlling it, just by people looking out for what's best for themselves. So before we go to break, I'll leave you with an Adam Smith quote that we can ponder for a moment here. So Adam Smith had wrote, "It is not the benevolence of the butcher, the brewer, the baker from which we expect our dinner, but from their regard to their own self-interest." It is not the benevolence of the butcher, the brewer, the baker from which we expect our dinner, but rather from their regard to their own self-interest. So how does a system that's built on self-interest work? He was very careful, by the way. The one thing that capitalism gets kind of slammed on is that, oh, it's all about greed. How can something good come out of something bad like greed? Haven't you ever read the Bible for them? Crying out loud, right? So, and Adam Smith really did not believe greed is not necessary. Greed is not a virtue, as maybe Ayn Rand would try to argue. And so there's a few people with some extreme viewpoints like that. But my interests can include the interest of my wife and my son, right? So selfishness means, who do I care about? Myself, right? I'm totally inward looking, everything's me, 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 me. We know those people, we don't like those people for the most part, right? They don't tend to have the greatest following of friends. There'll be some people that, hang out with them, but selfishness is not what we need in a market system. We need self-interest. And so it's okay for you to care about other people in your network of people that you do. So that's important distinction between self-interest and selfishness. That's why I brought up the book, The Theory of Moral Sentiments, is that Adam Smith was actually a big believer in that being an important piece of the puzzle was our relationships with other people, the trust that we have in our communities. That is there. That will help make a healthy, impersonal commercial society and market system, because we'll have those sorts of people that are working on both sides. And by them pursuing their own self-interest, I get more coconuts, you get more fish. There's plenty of win-win situations all over. So we don't need to know each other personally to have this market system work. But we do need well-defined property rights and a good, stable rule of law. Okay, any questions or comments there? Let's take a break. All right, so it is not the benevolence of the butcher, the brewer, the baker. What does benevolent mean? The goodness, yeah, that you're charitable or that you're nice, right? So if you're benevolent, it is not the benevolent. So we don't need them to be necessarily good guys. It is not the benevolence of the butcher, the brewer, the baker from which we expect our dinner, but from their regard to their own interests. Well, what keeps them from raising their prices then? Do they like high prices or low prices, the butcher and the brewer, the baker? High. If everything else stayed the same, it's like, well, I'm charging $10 for per pound for the steak, but $12 sounds better, right? $14 sounds even better, and $20 even sounds better. So what if we don't have charitable, nice people, and they're looking out for their own self-interest? Why don't they just raise the prices? Competition. So that ends up being the really important part in in a healthy market system, is that if the butcher does raise his prices to $15 a pound, then the baker says, oh, I've got some extra space. I'm a baker. I'm like almost like a chemist or something. I can back off meat and make some steak. So the baker starts saying, well, I'm going to carve out a little spot in my shop and start selling meat too. And the butcher just jacked it up to $15. I'm going to do it for $13. What does the butcher have to do? Drop the price. Because assuming they're equal in terms of quality, right? Consumers they like low prices. So they're gonna go patronize the store that has the lowest price where they get the most value, because if they buy a steak for $13, what's it worth to them? At least 13. You guys are catching on. That's so important. It's funny how almost programmed we are. Like if you paid $13, it's worth $13 for you. That's not. It's worth lots of different things to different people. And it might even be worth different to you on different days, right? That one day where you're really dying for a steak, you're like, oh, I paid $30 right now if I could just have a good steak, right? But other days when you had steak the night before, the next day you're like, oh, I don't want another steak. Steak would be worth $5 to me probably now if I had to value it. It costs 13, so do I buy the steak? No. So our values are changing all the time. So values are subjective in that way, or at least differ across people. And that's part of what makes our system go. So competition is the absolute most important thing to have in a healthy economy. When big business plays kissy face with big government, you don't have the same level of competition anymore. So one of the things that we have wrong with some governments in some places is when they're too close to each other. Facebook now, coming up with new controls and new ways to, we care about security, and now he's on his knees begging for forgiveness to Congress. It's always dangerous. We should always be a little bit leery in a market system when we start to have concentrated power in a variety of ways, because we get something good out of having a large number of sellers, a large number of buyers. Having that healthy competition is what makes the market system crank out steaks at a low price, right? And keep it going strong. So how far does the price drop? So $13, the butcher has to lower his prices. He goes to 12. The baker's like, I can do 11. So people are just flocking back to the baker, back to the butcher. How far will prices fall? Jacob?
They reach an equilibrium point for everyone.
What's equilibrium? What does that mean in this context, or what does it mean to you? What are you thinking?
It's the lowest, or I guess the agreement point where neither of them will go any other direction.
Yeah, I mean, we're not. I hesitate on the word agreement because
not
we're not.
agreement between the two, but like between the price, like.
Well,
I agree on that price, and that person agrees for their own reason.
If it is a competitive market and they're cutting prices, who's going to be the one left selling meat? The butcher? Why? Okay. So I'm hearing you kind of say that the butcher might be really the most cost-effective producer, right? So the person who's left selling, this is what's awesome about the market system again. So now, who ends up selling the meat? The person who can do it at the lowest cost. Not through a king or queen saying, you make meats, you make goods, you do this, but just the emergent, spontaneous order that comes about through exchange and through a healthy competition where prices are going to be competitive, and then who's left standing is the person with the lowest cost, because they can be the most, they can offer the lowest price, right? And kind of keep other people out, and they're still making a profit. Whereas the baker, if he was the high cost person, even at $10, now he's not making any money, right? And he's like, it was fun when prices were high, but I'm going to go back to baking goods. I'm going to go back to doing what I'm good at, right? Until the butcher starts jacking up the prices again, or whatever, right? So that is super critical in the market system. Okay, any other questions or comments there? Okay, so we saw this picture before, and now we're going to add on what the real market system is. So in a free market, and what we mean by free is it's kind of free from government ownership of property for the most part. So we're mostly going towards, this end of the spectrum is what we mean by a free market. No economist, well, I should take that back a little bit. There's a few crazy anarchy type people out there, but really no economist would say we don't need government. So it's never free from government like completely. because we need the police system, we need the court system, right? We need to protect these property rights. And so the government's always going to be there in some capacity. But for the most part, we're allowing people to make their own decisions. These guys are able to sell their resources, land, labor, capital, and entrepreneurship, and go put on a hat for 8 hours a day here in exchange for wages, rents, interest, and profit. So we got money being exchanged in the resource market, or the factory market. So we kind of use those terms interchangeably, factors of production, resources. And then of course we take our paycheck and we go run to Walmart and we give them some money and they give us final goods and services. So that's in the goods market. That's really the market system in a nutshell, is that we've got the resource market and the goods market. And kind of the spectacular thing that comes about is this transformation. So the real economy doesn't need money. The real economy is going on right here, where we might have had Tom and Jen, one doing coconuts, one doing fish. We're transforming our resources into the final goods and services that we want, right? So this process that goes on, the red ring is the real economy, the exchange of final goods and services, quantity of beer, quantity of chicken wings, quantity of labor hours, quantity of machines. That's the real economy. So money helps facilitate that trade, make it move a little faster and smoother. So money can take a lot of different forms. And so we can spend a whole time on cryptocurrency and Bitcoin. Anybody into that here? Curious? Nobody? Okay, that's kind of fun. You are a little bit or interested in it, or?
That's what I have to pay for.
Oh, is that right? You did it on Bitcoin? Oh, cool. Okay. So, enter government. Dun, dun, dun. So where does the government get its money from? Taxes, right? Are taxes a voluntary thing, like they are when we go to Walmart and buy the scissors? Oh. Okay. Now remember, I didn't get over this, so this is a good time to review that. So phones off and tucked away inside, out of sight. So not on the table. Some of you came in late too. So, and then if your ringer goes off, you'll lose a point. So you lose some points. So just remember to try to do that. So Josh, thank you for helping me remind to talk about that. So we'll let that one go. So back to government taxes. Is that voluntary? No. So it's different, right? If I go to Walmart, I'm going there because I'm choosing to do it. Can you choose to not pay your taxes? If you don't agree with Trump building a wall, can you just say, screw you, I'm not buying your wall? What happens in the United States if you don't pay your taxes? You get arrested, you go to jail. Like literally, you need to do that, right? There's people, tax evasion, so it's all by force. So the government, and we don't think about it that way, we're all like, oh, we all gotta kick in and pay our fair share or whatever. But it's really all by force. And so that is a dramatic difference between government-provided services and goods versus market goods and services. These two are operating on complete freedom. Freedom to choose, freedom to make what they want to make and try to sell it. These guys don't have to buy it, right? It's all voluntary exchange, whereas taxes are involuntary. And so they come from the two sources in the market. We get them at the cash register. So we've got sales taxes, and then we've got, of course, our income taxes that we pay on April 15th. And so that's how these guys get some of their inflow of money. What do they do with it? They buy weapons of mass destruction. So hopefully at an American company over here, but there's probably foreign-made parts and other things. So, you know, in our global economy, that's okay. As long as they weren't made by Iran or something. So maybe we don't even care about that. Blow them up with their own weapons. How about that? So that they enter the goods market for that. They need resources to run the White House. So somebody's got to scrub the toilet at the White House, right? So they hire resources, and then they got to pay them a paycheck. Of course, they still have to pay income tax too, so not all of it comes this way if you're a government employee. And then this last one here, I call Robin Hood payments, Robin Hood theory. So what did Robin Hood do?
Yeah.
Take from the rich, give to the poor, right? So in general, we call them transfer payments. So we take from the young, give to the old. What do we call that program in the United States?
Okay.
What is it?
Medicare.
Security, good. So take from the young, give to the old. That's always been a tax and transfer program. There's no big investment fund that you guys are putting into. Your money goes into the White House and it's immediately some old fart gets it. It's about a 3-to-1. It used to be 20-to-1, and that's why Social Security is going broke. But it's always been a tax and transfer system. So take from the young, give to the old. Take from the healthy, give to the unhealthy. Take from the employed, give to the unemployed. Right? So we got all of these programs that we have of transfer payments. And so out of $100 worth of taxes that you pay, what percent do you think goes to transfer payments as opposed to like weapons of mass destruction and building a wall and other stuff up here? 90%. That's pretty strong. What do you think? 30%, 60%, 20%, 40%? Like how much of this Robin Hood stuff goes on? Usually when I poll people, it'll be 30, 40, especially my international students. They're just floored by this when most of my students are Indian at the executive MBA. Well, about half of them. And then they're from all different countries. And it's approaching 70%. So usually floats somewhere between 65 and 70%. So of your $100 of federal income tax that you pay, that's what's being done with it. The government's kind of taking it from one person, giving to another in some capacity. Social Security and Medicare, Medicaid being the two big ones. Welfare programs, SNAP programs, all of that's a lot smaller, but that's a part of that puzzle, part of that piece as well. Okay, so that's kind of the government. I put these little P's in here because the government does provide public goods like national defense. So there are some things that we do enjoy that the market can't provide very well, like national defense. But they also do libraries. They also do education. Can private companies do education? Even kindergartners? First graders? Can private companies do that? Sure, we have private schools, right? So we've got the government being kind of a monopoly player in the provision of K through 12 education. Does it have to be that way? No. We've seen lots of good results with charter schools. Did any of you go to a charter school by chance? So it's a private school, but it's kind of a special thing. So there's school vouchers. So instead of just being forced to go to whatever public school is in where you live, you basically get a piece of paper that says you can go to school wherever you want. Just give them this piece of paper. So the budget is allocated, like let's just say $5,000 per student. And so they're holding a voucher, kind of like a coupon or Groupon or whatever that says, 1 year of education, $5,000. And so then they go to whatever school they want, which includes private schools. So this is being competition for public schools, because now everybody wanted to go to the private school, and so they have great programs and they're getting good graduates, and so now they choose to where they want to go to school. So we're adding choice, so a little more voluntary than the previous system we have. So some of these things that we just take for granted, like, oh, the government's got to do that. No, they don't. Not always, especially with the new technology that we have and the things that we can do with rating systems and apps and Uber and all of that. I think we're reaching a time where we can really start to look for private solutions, putting it in people's hands more than having the government continue to do it, just because we've done it that way for the last 50 years. And it probably wasn't possible when technology was less, but now maybe we can seek those ways. Okay, so yeah, libraries, you go down the line. Questionable whether we need a library anymore. All right, so rest of the world, they've got one of these things going on too. I got China up there. don't recognize it, but all the different countries, they've got one of these market system things going too. Sometimes the government is bigger than in other places, but when they get involved with trade, we get into imports and exports. So this is a little bit more of a macro topic, but I think it's important, especially in managerial econ, just to kind of keep that context. That's why I gave you guys these handouts so that you could do it. I can email that out to you, Safaria, too. I was going to do it to all the online students. So if you don't see something come across, remind me and I'll try to send it out.
Okay, thank you.
Through our exchanges there, we're back to Tom and Jen on the island, right? We can trade with other countries. One way is to get goods that we can't make ourselves. So, Canada would have some trouble providing oranges to their people if they had to grow them themselves, right? So they're going to trade for coffee and other things. But as we learned with the fishing thing, even if one country can do all the goods, there's incentives. So to find a trading partner. So one of the greatest things about international trade that attracted me to it early on was that everybody's got a comparative advantage in something, right? So that's why that story that I told you with Tom and Jen is an important one. It was really originally done by an economist named David Ricardo, and he was trying to convince the King of England to trade with France. And he kind of presented the story just like I did. So the King of England was Tom. Oh, England, you're better at everything we know, you're the best. But look at this, right? I can still make you better off than you could operating in isolation. There's still gains from trade to be done. And so Ricardo was able to make a trade argument. So that's really the Ricardian trade model is what we went through earlier with Tom and Jen. Boom, capital markets. Now this is the big plate of spaghetti. So when businesses do buy more machines or households save their money, we bring the financial markets into it, right? So they're acting as intermediaries. So when businesses go to buy a tractor, they can go to a bank where people have been saving some of their money. So instead of spending all of their money, the households here, now we've got consumption goods, imports, buy from the rest of the world, or save some of our money. And the government also enters the financial markets because they're not good at paying their bills. What do we call that when the government doesn't collect enough taxes to pay for their spending? It creates debt, but in a given year, if they don't collect enough taxes, if we think stock variable, flow variable, deficit, right? So the government deficit is when they haven't collected enough taxes to pay for their spending. We got about a 40-year track record of doing that in the United States. And that brings us to what Jacob brought up, the national debt. So the accumulation of deficits over the last 40 years has the United States debt at about $20 trillion. Now, some of that money is actually owned or owed, I should say, to other government agencies. So the real debt that we have to foreigners and stuff is about half that, around $10 trillion. Because it's kind of like double counting, right? If we have this arm of the government owes these guys money. So if you net that stuff out. But most of the people that are the alarmists about the national debt, they're going to give you that $20 trillion figure. And that is approximately equal to the dollar value of all final goods and services produced within the nation's boundaries. So gross domestic product, GDP, is the income for the nation. Because if we go back to let me just come back to this because I didn't really hit that as hard as I wanted to. If we look at the spending that we do on final goods and services, that gets turned into somebody's income. So these guys own all the resources. They lease them or sell them to these guys. And so every dollar of the $120 item that we bought at Walmart, every single dollar of that $120 gets paid out in some form. So it becomes somebody else's income. So the income for the United States is around $20 trillion. So we're making 20 trill, and we owe 20 trill. Right? So that's kind of just rough numbers, and again, I don't want to spend too much time, but I think it's important to have some of this stuff set up as we think about more of our microeconomic issues. All right, questions or comments there? Yeah.
I was just curious, does our GDP grows pretty consistently with our debt?
Yes, I mean, our GDP growth is usually 2 to 3% a year on average for the last 40 years. So our income levels are rising too, which is important because our population growth grows too. So a statistic that we look at is GDP per person, per capita GDP. And so you kind of need your income growth to maintain your standard of living to stay up with population growth. So yeah, the answer is yes, it has, and it's actually grown faster than population growth. But the debt growth, well, Trumpster is running about $1 trillion deficit. We got $20 trillion worth of debt already. So let's see, 10% of 20 trillion is 10% of 20 trillion. 20 million, no. 2 trillion, good. So 5% would be 1 trillion, and that's what Trump is running. That's what Obama ran to, by the way. So Trump has not been too good on government deficits. So we're spending about $1 trillion more than we're collecting in taxes. The projection's gone down. I'm using kind of round numbers here, but just to give you an idea, Jacob, of compared to our income, we're having that debt grow by 5%. You know, because we're adding on to the 20 trillion by running a $1 trillion debt. So it can and has grown faster than the income too in given years. Yes.
What did GDP?
Gross domestic product. Gross domestic product. It should be on your sheet there in the small print. I think I had it down there. Okay, so I think I've probably said enough about that. There's the foreign exchange market. Okay, let me stop on this one for this content, and then we'll be about done with our macro stuff. So wealth of nations. So I kind of got our buckets here with our decisions. So the same thing, so that the economy of the United States, it's the aggregation of all the individual people making decisions, right? So your business, we're going to be studying businesses that are buying machines, and so that's adding to the stock of resources that they can now use next year. And so for the wealth of nations, we can get more by having more savings as opposed to consumption. So I was the purchases of capital. So we were filling up our machine bucket. So if we're making choices here that carry on to next year, so if we buy a tractor, you guys have seen old tractors in the field that are 20, 30 years old, right? So they stay on the books for a long period of time. And so that's what helps build the wealth of the nation to get our balance sheet up. So this is some old numbers that I was just approximating, but I think we're at $70 trillion now or something. But you know, we can do the balance sheet for the nation. So how we calculate wealth is a stock thing on a balance sheet, assets minus liabilities, or what I own minus what I owe, right? Assets minus liabilities, that's your calculation of how wealthy you are. So if you're a millionaire, that number is at least $1 million. When you add up the value of all your 401k and your investments in your house, all of your assets, everything you own, minus any debts that you have, if that number is $1 million, you're a millionaire. So that is calculating wealth as opposed to our income. Income, again, is the income per year, income per quarter, and that's how we can build wealth, is with income. But we build it through the choices we make. Beer and chicken wings and pizza get pooped out tomorrow, right? Whereas tractors persist. So what are we doing at a personal level with our money is the same way. So how individuals build wealth is how nations build wealth as well. Okay, Questions or comments there? Do political markets different? Oh, I forgot the markers. Okay, so chapters 1 and 2 of your book kind of go through this value creation stuff. The author is going to get detailed with some of the decision making and how we move resources from lower value places to higher value places and how the market system kind of does that. That's kind of what I've been touching on. So what I want to do is get into a little bit of the chapter 3 stuff. So chapters 1, 2, and 3 are what is on the docket. Also, there are a few chapters, so I'm just basically saying, don't freak out. Not every chapter has those, the homework. Sometimes they're combined on one. So just always look. There's usually for each chapter, formative, summative, and then the homework at the end of the chapter. But there are just a couple of chapters where they combine it, and I think chapter 1 might be one of them because they, it's just kind of introduction material, and then they roll the questions into the chapter 2 content of anything that was relevant for it. All right, so so let's think about the cost. Suppose we've got a grocery store. I want you to imagine you're a grocery store owner. And we've all been, I pick grocery stores because we've all been into grocery stores. And I want you to kind of put yourself in the grocery store and look around and tell me what types of costs we have for running the business. So let's just kind of brainstorm. You guys help me out. So grocery store, go. Utilities, okay, so like electric, water, whatever, those sorts of utilities, is that what you're thinking? Okay, good. Labor. So we got people. What do we got? A cashier. We got a manager. And maybe we got a stocker. Not like I'm stocking you, but like stocking the shelves. Okay. What else? Inventory. So we got the inventory of the final goods that are sitting on the shelves. Good. What else we got? We got shelves. I just said shelves. What else we got? Let's hit about 30 things.
Machine.
Just start firing. What type of machine?
Like,
So I don't want it too general. I want it to be grocery store deal.
so like floor cleaners and then
Okay.
some machines to help stock shelves.
Floor cleaner, machine, cash register.
So
Good.
like pallets and stuff.
Cash register. I'm sorry, what?
There's just a machine.
Oh, another machine.
So, like,
Yeah, that's good. That's good on the machine. We got coolers, I guess, and right. So we got shelves and coolers. What other sorts of expenses do we have for running our grocery store?
Phone bill.
Safari, what do you got for us? I want to hear something from you. So phone.
Like a phone bill.
The people you buy from.
Our suppliers.
Yes, supplies.
Okay. So we got suppliers. That's kind of the people. Now, do we have to pay these guys, or so the suppliers are kind of bringing? Are you talking about the inventory of goods, or did you have something else in mind?
Yeah, it's kind of like the inventory.
Okay. What else? Permits. Permits. Yeah, we got government stuff to deal with, don't we? We might have permits. What's that? Land. Yeah, we're sitting on some sort of real estate. We've got the parking lot maybe to maintain. Right. We got the building. We got taxes, of course. Yeah. So we got property taxes. We got maybe some income taxes.
Like the signs.
Sales taxes. What's that?
Signs?
Signs, yeah, we got signage. We got advertising. Signs, advertising,
Insurance.
insurance. We gotta have insurance for the slip and falls. Insurance probably brings some legal fees for an attorney.
Marketing.
Marketing.
Security.
Security. Okay. All right, so that's probably good for now. As we look at this list, the exercise that every company needs to do carefully is think about costs that change with how I make money and costs that are fixed. So we've got variable costs and fixed costs, and we can kind of go through this list and think about it. So how do we make money in the grocery store? What's really our, when we think about our profit equation, what are we doing? We're selling goods, right? So I like to think of it as, you know, the beeps. So beep, 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 beep. That's like the cash register ringing, right? It's like quantity sold. Beep, 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 right? So what I want to make a distinction of is what costs vary with the number of beeps and what costs are fixed. So as we look at this list, which ones don't really matter if we have 500 beeps that day or 5,000 beeps? In other words, the cost is not going to vary with the number of beeps. The coolers, yeah. So cooler costs, shelving costs, those are probably going to fall into that fixed category, right? Now, what about the electricity to run the cooler, though? So we had electricity up here somewhere. Is that fixed or variable?
I mean, I can kind of get an estimate and see where your utilities are. That's kind of it is.
But if it's hotter outside,
Yeah.
you're probably less likely to use a little bit more energy.
And what about if we have 5,000 beeps that day, if it's a really high volume day, if people are opening and closing the cooler to grab the goods? So it might be a little bit, but again, when it's overnight and the cooler's there, it's probably going to be what it's going to be, right? It's going to be fairly fixed, whether we have it. So we got to keep our inventory cold. So electricity kind of brings our first thought here of like, oh, okay, well, it's part of it could be variable, but part of it's fixed. There's probably a larger fixed component, I would guess, that it's not going to change too much whether I do 500 beeps or 5,000 beeps with the cooler. But kind of got us thinking. So that can be kind of a little bit variable, but maybe mostly fixed. And what else? Inventory, is that fixed or variable? Variable, right? So it's boom, boom as I go with each beep. Okay. Floor cleaner machine, fixed. The cleaning service that comes and cleans when we close at midnight. Do they care how many beeps we did? Probably not. It's probably whatever. It's dirt. It might be more dirty, but our deal with them is probably fixed. Like you just have to clean it, whatever it is, unless it's something real awful, and then they might say, "Hey, you got to pay me a little bit more for the cleaning up the puke in aisle 6, 7, and 8." Gross. Okay. Property tax. Fixed, right? Sales tax. Varies with the beep, right? So that can be varying around. Permits. Does the government care if we have 5,000 beeps or 500 beeps? Nope. Usually that's fixed. It wouldn't be tied to your sales. Otherwise, that would be more like a sales tax. Advertising. Fixed or variable? Variable, fixed. So we really want to think about that day. So if I spent money on the ad this weekend, I took out a $100 ad in the newspaper. Doesn't matter if I do 500 beeps or 5,000 beeps. No, it's fixed, right? So that one's not varying with the beeps. Insurance, fixed, whatever day we were. So that's what we want to do, is break down all of our costs in the business. And this is really important for the decision making. Is that we're going to have our profits be total revenue minus total cost, but now we're going to break total cost into total variable cost plus total fixed cost. So total variable cost plus total fixed cost. And the definition is simple. Variable costs vary with quantity. Fixed costs do not vary. Fixed costs do not vary with quantity sold. Okay, so quick question for you here is if quantity equals 0, then profit equals what? Our total fixed costs. You still have to pay the rent. You still have to pay the advertising company. So even if you're producing nothing, then you're still going to have to pay your fixed costs. So profits equal your total fixed costs, which is minus, of course, on the minus sign up there. Now, you can see how that's so important for decision making now, right? Because if I want to make more money, which costs do I really want to focus in on? The variable costs, right? The fixed are going to be what they're going to be. So now I need to focus in on variable costs. So therefore, variable costs are important for decisions day to day. So should I cut, I have 10 people working the cash register right now, should I cut somebody, right? Should I tell them why don't you punch out, we're gonna go to 8, right? That's a decision you're making right in the moment. And what's important to think about is what's that going to save me? Another place where this is important is whether you should shut down your business or not. Not go out of business, but just what economists call shut down. So when you close your doors, when does Price Chopper close here in Ottawa? 10, I can't remember honestly if it's 10 or 11. I think it is 10. So they close from 10 p.m. and I think they open up at 6 a.m. maybe? 6 or 7? Is it 6? Okay. So from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., they're producing 0. Why? Why not be open 24/7 like Walmart is? Why are they not open?
What the cost of the cost of the variable would equal up to be the cost of the mix. So like keeping the lights in, having people there might not amount to the amount of stuff they'll actually sell.
They'll actually sell it. Yeah, you're good. That's not that. By the way, you did really well with that because that's not easy for most people to get, or at least the first go around since you haven't had an econ class for a while, right? So that was good because we usually tend to think about, well, we got to cover the fixed costs. No, you don't. You got to cover the variable costs. So if we're running one cash register, and let's just say it's the manager running, and that person's getting paid $10 an hour. What do we need to make this next hour? At least $10 an hour, right? So I need to cover my variable costs. Don't worry about the rent. Don't worry about the cash register costs and the shelving costs. Don't worry about the electric bill, right? Other than we might be able to turning down the lights when we do. But we need to cover, so the variable part of the electricity that would be the overhead lights would be, of course we have security lights and the coolers and stuff are still going. So that little bit of saving, but yeah, we need to cover all of our variable costs to stay open. So my guess is that Price Chopper has learned that they don't get enough business in the door between the hours of 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. They start to get enough to cover their variable costs at least at 6 a.m. The store's probably not jam-packed, but they chose 6 a.m. because they can cover the one person running the cash register, and they're going to have enough early birds filtering through the store that it's going to cover at least that, right? So we always need to cover our variable costs. Okay, good. Any other questions or comments there so far? All right. All right, so we're going to do a little graphing. What these things look like. So if I was to graph total fixed cost, if I was to graph that, putting quantity on the horizontal axis and measuring dollars on the vertical axis, what would the total fixed cost curve look like, or the relationship? The total fixed cost. Kind of a line, horizontal, vertical, giving a blessing now. So how much is total fixed cost when I produce 10 units? The same as 100 units, right? So at 100 units, it's the same. So the total fixed cost curve would look like that. It just is what it is. What would the average fixed cost curve look like? Average fixed cost. How would we find, let's say that the total fixed cost is $100,000. Is the total fixed cost. How would we find the average fixed cost? Average fixed cost. Same line? What do you mean? Oh, like we write it right on top of each other? How would we find the average fixed cost? So let's go. Let's put on our equation goggles first.
Divide the total fixed cost by the quantity sold.
Yeah, good. So divide the total fixed cost by the quantity, right? So total fixed cost divided by Q. So $100,000 divided by 10 is. I love to see you guys like 10,000. Good. So that's $10,000, right? So at 10, it's 10,000. And what is it at 100? 1,000, right? So now we're down here. Look at, we've cut this by a tenth. And so the average fixed cost curve looks like that. So this concept's important in that it does highlight something for us. If we sell more units, are we going to be more profitable? Yes. So with higher quantity sold, we are economizing, if you will. I almost hesitate to use that word, but we're getting more bang for our buck out of our fixed assets or out of our fixed cost anyway. So we're more efficiently using our shelving, we're more efficiently using our coolers, right? So we have those fixed costs if we can lower. So companies who need to really sell a lot of units, do they have lots of fixed costs or little fixed costs? Little fixed costs. Lots or little? Everybody good with that? Little fixed costs?
For small, Boston.
Yeah, I love this.
When is it important for companies to have higher volumes? When their equation has lots of fixed cost and little, so let's say this is 90-10 or 90-10. Fixed costs are a large fraction. 90% of what we do has fixed costs to the equation. Or if it was vice versa.
When the fixed cost is 10 and the variable cost is 90.
then it's important for them to sell lots of quantity?
Yes. Other way around.
Other way around. So when we have a lot of fixed costs, we're building airplanes, for instance. Boeing's in a little bit of a pinch if you haven't watched the news right now, because the little Boeing 737 MAX plane or whatever is still in trouble. So a lot of an airplane companies manufacturing, there's a lot of fixed costs there, right? Think about building an airplane, the type of machines you need and assemblies and plants and all of that stuff. So the higher volume they can sell, the more money they can make, because they're going to be really making more, they're going to be really saving a lot of costs with higher volumes. But on the flip side, if your business is mostly variable costs, if you have mostly variable costs, then it's not as big of a deal necessarily to sell volume. You don't have that same requirement in the same way that you do with higher fixed costs. So that's kind of something that plays in. There's a concept that we'll get to later. I think I'm jumping the gun a little bit to even put it in here, so I'm not going to confuse you with it at this point. But we'll look at long run versus short run and how that can be important to drive costs down. But for right now, we just kind of want to think, okay, we've got fixed costs. Every company's got some fixed costs. They got some variable costs. And that's what, the way it's going to shake out. So another graph is the average total cost. And then watch me draw this here. So if you find there's a spot where it bottoms out, that would be the minimum point where average costs are minimized. And then the average variable cost is also bowl-shaped, but then it merges towards the top and it bowls out. So all we're really doing, if we kind of come back to this equation that I did, total cost equals total variable cost plus total fixed cost. If I want average total cost, I just divide by Q, just like what we did here for the average, right? What I do to one side of the equal sign, I got to do to the other side, divide by Q, divide by Q. And now we've got a nice little thing that you should have memorized. Average total cost is the sum of average variable cost and average fixed cost. So there's like 5 different little equations kind of all built up into this expression, which is kind of neat. What's the formula for average variable cost? Oh, it's right here. And the sum of the averages equals the total. Okay. So this looks this way because what's in between here? What's this little height? So if I pick out this quantity, let's call it 1,000 units, right? So when I make 1,000 units, the average total cost per unit, I go up to the average total cost curve, I hang a left, and I find out that my average cost per unit is $10. My average variable cost per unit, I go up to the average variable cost curve, hang a left, and my average variable cost is $8 per unit. So average variable cost, average total cost. What's that little vertical distance there? A little orange.
Average fixed cost.
Average, which one?
Fixed cost.
Fixed, good. So average fixed cost, they have to sum together. So my average fixed cost is right here. And it would be $2. Okay, so this thing brings you through some of those cost curves for starters, or at least dips our toe in it. And then just so we have it in our place, next week we're going to spend time on marginal cost, which is the most important one for economics. So I'm going to add this here so that it's in your notes in the same spot where we got into all these equations. So marginal cost is, this one I'll write out, marginal cost, MC. Let's see, I think I'll just get rid of this. So marginal cost is the change in total cost from an additional unit of production. Marginal cost is the change in total cost from an additional unit of production. So formula-wise, marginal cost is the change, we're going to use a little delta like in math class, the change in total cost from the change in quantity. Now, if you look at it really closely, the only thing that differs with that equation to this one is the little triangles. So average total cost was the total cost divided by quantity. But now we're saying, well, what if we add another unit? What if we change things? I'm currently making 1,000 units, but what if I made 1,001? Just one more. Just gonna squeeze one more off the production line today, right? So if I squeeze just one more off the production line, what kind of costs am I going to incur? Fixed or variable? If I just bump up production by one little unit, variable, right? So it has to be variable costs that are going to change. So if we kind of think about this equation using what we did down here, we can say, oh, okay, I can do a little bit of math here. So it's the change in total variable cost divided by the change in quantity, plus the change in total fixed cost divided by the change in quantity. Right? So I took this equation and then distributed my little triangles kind of across the expression. But this can be simplified. This plus this can be simplified. Anybody see what we can do? We can always, we can add things, but we're trying to make it less. We could factor out the Q, but I don't want to do that's not really helping us out that much too. We can factor out the delta Q. There's a better simplification we can do here. So this says marginal cost is the change in total variable cost from a change in quantity plus the change in total fixed cost from a change in quantity.
Did you put MC equals 18 plus MC?
No. I see what you're saying. You can throw that in. It's even better than that. So listen to my language here. Marginal cost is the change in total variable cost from a change in quantity from bumping up one more unit. And then it's also, you got to add in the change in total fixed costs from adding one more unit. How much does total fixed cost change by, Wes? It doesn't change. So it's how much does it equal to? 0. So that term just disappears because fixed costs don't change with quantity by definition. So I kind of took you through that so that you see how we're really focusing in on variable cost when we're talking about marginal cost, right? It's just, should I cut the person, the cash register? Should we close at 10 p.m.? well, what are my variable costs? That's the only thing that's going to be relevant as I make that decision that night at the restaurant or whatever. Over on this graph, the marginal cost curve is J-shaped and cuts through the minimum point. So kind of watch me draw this. It bottoms out, and then it comes up and cuts through the minimum point. So the marginal cost curve looks like that. Okay, that's probably enough. I'm going to spend more time on that, those concepts next week. On that particular part, I want to get into the other important part of this for tonight. So questions so far? A little bit of mechanics, just kind of getting that down. So I want to tell a story about a restaurant person. So we have an English professor. Some of you have heard this story, but maybe it'll bring smiles to remember that, oh, this is the same story he told back in principles class, if you remember the thing. So we have an English professor who is going to open up a restaurant. English prof opens a restaurant. So let's say Heart Attack Grill, good greasy food there. Or Specs, I guess we could use Specs. Should we go Specs? Jacob has a kind of a family bar and restaurant back in Topeka. So English professor opens a restaurant called Specs. Is it SPEC? CKS. There is the K and the S. Was it somebody's last name?
Was my grandpa's nickname.
It was your the nickname for your grandma. Okay, Specs. All right, so he used to work at the university for $60,000 a year. So called Specs and quit OU. Quit OU, where he made $60,000 a year. But he was so sick and tired of students and their whining and all that. Like, screw it, I'm out of here. That's an opportunity. All right. So he looks at the cost of doing business, and so he's got he figures his labor, got the cooks and dishwashers and servers. So that all runs $110,000 a year. And then we've got capital of the grill and coolers and tables and all of that stuff. Some stuff he's got on lease. And so that runs, let's go $200,000 a year. Okay, then he's got some other, miscellaneous operating expenses, license fees, all that kind of stuff, dealing with the city and whatnot. And that's $30,000 a year. Okay, so the ex-prof will manage be his own manager, will manage specs, avoiding paying the market rate of $35,000 per year for a manager. Okay, so if total revenue for the first year, if total revenue is 380, what are profits? So he opens up the door and he gets 380. What are his profits? How much is he making? Everybody got the story? Any questions about the details? So let's just kind of review. He used to make 60 at OU. He's got these costs. He's going to manage it himself, so he doesn't have to pay that 35. And so if total revenue is 380,000, what are his profits? What's
So
the
does he
profit?
pay himself 35,000, or are you telling me, well, like, does the business pay him 35,000?
He's managing it, so he owns the business, so he's going to get the profit at the end of the day anyway.
Okay.
So what were you thinking? Yeah,
Like the answer?
Yeah.
40,000.
40,000. Okay, how'd you get it?
So I added up all the total costs of the 110,000 that he pays for labor,
Okay,
the 200,000 that he.
these three.
Yes.
Okay, so what have we got here? 340,000. Okay,
And then I subtracted that by the
From the-
total of the.
from the 380. So we have 340,000, and you get 40,000. Yes.
Yes.
Okay. What do you think?
So are we looking at the total revenue for the business, right? Because then you would take 35,000 out of that, right?
Okay, so Jacob, you wanna pay him this.
Well, I'm just wondering, because if he's on the payroll, the 380,000 is the total revenue of the business, that 35,000 still be recognized on the payroll.
So you want to.
I mean, the way I'm doing it is be 5,000, you just
Yeah.
subtract it.
So 300, I get you. So 380 minus the 340 minus the 35. If he pays himself that pay and he's got 5,000, right? Is that okay? So, and maybe for accounting purposes or something that's needed. Like the accountant says, oh well, this is paid at this rate, and you're going to want to pay yourself a wage so that you show, because business profits are taxed higher than labor profits, then this will be better for you. And so then the English professor kind of says, you do your accounting hocus pocus, but the last time I checked, 5,000 plus 35,000 is 40,000.
Wait, no, total revenue would be 380,000.
380, yeah.
Net, because it's not net, right? That's how you're asking is.
No, you're fine. You're fine with what you did.
Oh, profits. Oh, what are profits?
But you see how the English professor has a good point. It's like, you can calculate it that way, but I'm getting paid this, and I'm getting paid this. The last time I checked, that's that.
So I did it right?
Yeah.
Oh, yay me!
Now, neither of those, though, are the way we do it in economics class.
Aw.
Opportunity cost. What do you mean by that, Jason?
So, gotta compare what his other opportunity was, which was the 60,000. He could have made it, he stayed at
So where do we put that, and how do we modify one or these, or do we start from scratch, or how do you want to calculate profit? I assume you're okay with 380. Right? Total revenue. We're mostly dealing with cost. So now what do you want to do? Are you okay with these?
Yeah, you can still take away that.
Okay, we still got to take away those, so we're got the 340K out of there. And now,
You subtract the 60,000 and what he could have made.
60,000, you want to put that in here?
So subtract the
Or
difference.
subtract the
Or do we
difference
add it
between
onto
the two.
this one, or the difference, or?
Yeah, maybe. What you said.
Well, because he would have done 60, but instead he got 35. So the opportunity cost is the difference.
Yeah, so I don't know, let's just do it for fun. What happens here? So you would, I'm hearing this,
Or the 40, yeah, the 40.
so he's gonna get but now we're gonna put 60, which then means he's making minus 20. Now again, the English professor says, well, last time I checked, I took 5,000 and 35,000, I got 40,000 in my pocket. I don't care what you learned in econ class, I earned $40,000 of spendable money, right? That's how much was in my wallet when I went there. So all of these three, none of them are wrong per se. It's just that one of them's more right than others. I'm a little biased, but so why do we want to include that? What does this do differently than the other two in terms of for the English professor? What is, again, I want you all to know and agree that the English professor knows that he makes 40,000 to pay his bills with, right? I mean, that's his take-home cash flow pay, no matter which of these three methods we do. That's what profit are. But what does this one do that's different? Make a choice shows what? Shows what he lost compared to my other alternatives, right? So yeah, so Jason said it early on. So the key word here is opportunity cost. So what could you be doing if you didn't do what you did? That's kind of a short, I have close to my Dr. Seuss version. The thing you would have done if you didn't do what you did is opportunity cost. And so, Jacob, you were saying, what does that do if this is negative? Then what does it kind of bring to light?
Oh, he helps him make his choice.
Yeah, it just makes you see things better, right? That, you know, the restaurant's kind of fun, but it's kind of a pain in the butt too. You know, maybe I can reorganize my life a little bit. And in fact, if he did go back to teaching, and he hired the manager, it would turn into this, plus the 60. Right? So financially anyway, again, kind of ignoring some of the other stuff, but we want profits to act like a signal in economics. So the signal that's going out here is, you suck, you suck. Go do something else. What should I do? Go do the thing that you could be doing, right? Your opportunity cost. Check your opportunity cost because you could be doing something different. And so that's what we're trying to highlight here is thinking about that stuff. You can't claim this for the IRS. So this is not how you do it for your tax purposes, right? You can't just write off 60,000 and say, oh, I'm going to pay myself 60,000 and now I've got a loss and now I can count this loss against my other income somewhere or whatever, right? That's what you can get thrown in jail for. We talked about jailing when you're not paying your taxes, so that would be part of it. So this is strictly used for making better decisions by including opportunity cost. And so this one is economic profit. Economic profit. And both of these two could be referred to as accounting profit. So the accountant's going to do this way. Again, the English professor method, this is the prof calculation here. I'm making 40,000 bucks. Nothing wrong with that. That's kind of just that way we calculate it. Maybe the accountant says, oh, well, we got to pay you a wage for IRS purposes. And then the economist is really different in that we're going to put opportunity cost in there, the full cost of doing something else. So, key point. Economists include opportunity costs in the calculation of profit. So opportunity cost is the highest valued alternative. One kind of general definition here for opportunity cost is the highest valued alternative foregone. The highest valued alternative foregone. So, Safaria, if you weren't in class tonight, what would you be doing?
My discussion boards.
What's that?
Discussion boards.
Oh, doing discussion board. Yeah, you'd have to do that. That'd be one thing, right? Okay, what would you be doing, Josh? You weren't in class tonight. Work? Alex?
Probably be at work.
Be at work? Sleeping? Okay, it's tired. I came in at 3 a.m. last night. So we got sleep, work, discussion board, what? Rock climbing. So we all have different alternatives. And, you know, let's say Jason said I could be sleeping too. You look a little bit tired. So rock climbing or sleeping. Which one is her opportunity cost? It's not all of them, but the thing you would have done if you didn't do what you did. The highest valued alternative you gave up. So that is our version of opportunity cost.
That changes. Like,
That
so like, because she could value sleep
That's right.
more than rock climbing.
So this concept, this makes economics more like art than science. When we do economic consulting, you need to listen to what is going on and what are the values that the business places on different things. And so you're really trying to hone in on what are the other opportunities so that you can make a good decision. So part of our opportunity cost, total opportunity cost, includes explicit and implicit. The explicit costs are the accounting costs, right? The things that we had, these are the accounting values. $10 an hour for a laborer, 10 hours of work, 10 times 10 is 100. I spent $100 worth of costs. They were explicit. So we got easy dollar values. Implicit costs need to be estimated. So these need to be estimated. And hopefully estimated accurately. When I went to Walmart to buy my scissors, when I went to Walmart to buy my scissors, I had an explicit cost of $1. What else? What was implicit? Your time. So my opportunity cost is I could have bought a coffee with this dollar. So I gave up $1 of something else. So the explicit cost was $1, but then I also had time spent to go to the store and, you know, search for it or go to Walmart. Gas would be explicit, but the value of your time doing that would be implicit. And does it make a difference if Russ McCullough's time going to Walmart or Bill Gates' time?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So the value is personal, and that's what makes economics different, and why it always seems to hang up students on some questions, because we tend to think, oh, everybody has the same value, it costs what it costs. We're so hung up on explicit costs that we're missing out on some important decisions that need to be done with implicit costs. So anyway, that's your total opportunity cost, has both implicit and explicit. Let me drive that home with one more little story. Suppose the restaurant, oh wait, before I leave, I kind of erased part of it. I do want to put one more note. If total revenue increases to 400,000, what is profit? You guys can just look at your numbers now. So now the English professor was at 380, but now it jumped to 400. He's had a good month or a good year. Maybe it's next year. What is profit? 0. Are 0 profits bad? Do we want profits to be as big as possible? Yeah, we want more profits, but in economics, economic profit, if this equation equals 0, which it does with the 400, so if this bumps up to 400, this goes to 0. And that's okay, because how much is he really making? How much is he really making? 60, like spendable money, he's making 60, and can he do better elsewhere? No, that's the whole point. So 0 profits are okay in economics class. We always want more of them, but profits are okay. So if it goes to 400, economic profit equals 0, but this is okay because you're covering your opportunity cost. In other words, you can't do better elsewhere. Okay, restaurant needs new grill, $10,000. So the price of a new grill is $10,000. So we need to get a new grill, and the leasing company has a deal for you. So you can, option number 1 is to pay cash. Number 2 is no payments for 1 year, and you just pay the 10% interest. So simple interest, no payments, interest rate equals 10%. So doing the math here, what's the grill going to cost at the end of a year? $11,000, right? So we're going to have the $10,000 grill plus $1,000 worth of interest gives me $11,000. Should I pay cash or should I do the financing deal?
There's no rate to $2,000 somewhere else. Dave Ramsey's house, you should pay that.
Well, this is with an investment, so yes, you're right. Dave's not a big fan of the borrowing, but I think for investment purposes, it's a little bit different story. So, what were you saying? It depends on what you can do with the cash.
You get a better rate than you would, $10,000 elsewhere.
Okay, so it depends.
6,000 somewhere else, pay 12,000 and pay it all off, you know?
So the question then is, what is your opportunity cost? The opportunity cost of cash. So suppose that he's got $50,000 in their account, right? So having the cash isn't, they got the cash, but the question is, should I pay for the thing in full, or should I do the financing program? So look at how it differs. So if your opportunity cost is 5%, do it or not do it? Do the cash or do the financing? If your opportunity cost is 5,000, that's what Jacob was kind of talking on. So in other words, you currently have an opportunity for 10,000 to earn 5%. Maybe it's in a low interest account or something or whatever. So should I pay cash or should I do the financing deal? Financing deal? Why?
You net 4,000. When do you want to pay cash? Because otherwise you pay 500 more at the end of it.
So one way to think about it is, yeah, if I keep my cash in there, then I'm going to have how much at the end of the year? 10,000 plus 500 gives me 10,500. So I'm still light on the 500, right? So it might be better just to take that out and pay cash at this point. However, if you had an opportunity to make 15% on your money, so now maybe you could expand your business, run a new advertising, and you think you're going to get 15% rate of return on a new advertising that you're doing. Now, if I get my 15%, what do I add on? 1,500, giving me 11,500. And now I pay off the grill at 11, and I'm up 500 bucks, right? So the answer depends on your opportunity cost. What else could you be doing or would you be doing with the cash? So if your opportunity cost is 5%, you should pay cash. Otherwise, do the financing. If your opportunity cost is 15%. There's a couple other ways to think about that. With present, we'll do a little bit of present value work in the future in the class too. So you're kind of, it really wasn't fair. Like sometimes people will say, "Whoa, pay the cash, you're going to save $1,000." Well, it's not fair to look at 11,000 a year from now versus 10,000 today, right? So we've got that whole time value of money concept going, where if I asked you, what would you rather have? $1 today or $1 a year from now? What's more valuable to you? Today, right? So money sooner is more valuable, and in finance, we can start to do that with the interest rates and thinking about, well, I could have left my money in this account and I would have had 10.5. Or I could have left my money in this account and got 15%. So now what we're doing is we're bringing our 10,000 plus the opportunity cost into the future, and now it's fair to compare 11 with 10.5 or 11 with 11.5. Okay, so that is opportunity cost, economic profit, accounting profit. Questions? All right, that is it for tonight. Good job, you made it.